Another Formula One season is about to begin, and as we so often seem to get, we've had a last-minute surprise rule change coming in. It looks like we're going to get a bonus point for fastest laps in Grand Prix this year for the first time since the 50s. And normally when we see these rule changes that we didn't expect just before the eve of the Australian Grand Prix, I'm immediately drawn to the 2016 qualifying farce. So let's hope it doesn't go that badly, but it's not been met with much enthusiasm, shall we say, in the Autosport office. So we're going to have a bit of a debate about the system and whether it's a good idea or not. And I've got Andrew van der Burg and Stuart Codling here well up for this, and we'll gauge their levels of enthusiasm as we go. So VDB, we're going to start with you. We've seen this in other championships. You've covered or worked in some of those series, such as GP2 and Formula E, of course. And those series have had to kind of come up with supplementary regulations to this to prevent these kind of rules, and all for a bonus point, getting out of control. So should that be a warning sign to F1 immediately?
Yes. They're just contrived, and the level of rules that you have to put in to stop people playing the system ends up almost making them not much fun anyway, because ideally it's like, something to play for if you've had a bad race, and you can really show your pace. But the teams are smarter than that, so what they do is they work out how to play the system. The first ever GP2 weekend, where it was 2 points for fastest lap, Lapierre was on pole, but his clutch blew up on the line and he missed the first race. Second race, they took out all the fuel, he set fastest lap on lap 2 and pulled the car over, but it meant that he was going to get points when there was probably a good chance his car was going to break down again. That's not what they want, and that's why they've already introduced it for the top 10. So it's not going to be a fairy tale point for somebody who was, taken out of the first corner and they put a new front wing on, he charged around, a brilliant drive to 11th. Oh, at least he got a point for fastest lap. Oh no, wait a minute, it's top 10 only. And 6 of those places we can already pretty much say who it's going to be. So it's almost certain that they're going to get the bonus point too.
It's not really a meaningful enough incentive, is it? They may as well have an incentive scheme like in Glengarry, Glen Ross. Second prize is a set of steak knives, third prize is you're fired.
I think a better incentive is to do something in qualifying, to force people to really go for it in qualifying, where outright lap pace actually means something. I mean, fastest lap is meaningless at the best of times. It doesn't mean you had the fastest car in that race. It meant you had the fastest car in those conditions. So when you had low fuel and the freshest set of tyres. And I think this is how it's going to play out. Whichever one of the drivers of Mercedes, Ferrari or Red Bull has had the worst race will probably pit with 5 laps, maybe 10 laps to go, whack a new set of tyres on and get an extra point, especially if there's a big enough gap for them to drop into without losing a place. Or maybe they'll say, I think this will be known as the Bottas bonus point after a while, they'll say, Valtteri, well, you got some new tyres, see if you can re-overtake the Red Bulls and get another point, away you go.
Valtteri, it's James, get your ass into gear. Fastest lap, please, thank you.
So the notion that this is going to cause any sort of surprise or additional intrigue, I mean, honestly, I hope there are better ideas coming down the line than this.
Yeah, like you say, Glenn, no, we have had this system before, and the only time it's delivered an actual result is in 1958, where Mike Hawthorn won over Sterling Moss as a result of having done more fastest laps. And we were discussing before the cameras rolled that arguably we'd much prefer to see Sterling Moss as a world champion than Mike Hawthorn.
No disrespect to the Hawthorn, but I think the world in which Sterling Moss was a world champion and there weren't fastest lap bonus points is probably a better one.
That's a good point. And of course, now there are so many points on offer during a Grand Prix, 25 for a win working downwards, it's very unlikely that a solitary point at any point is really going to decide a championship as it could have done in the past. Codders, VDB's painted a pretty bleak picture there. Are there any positives we can see for this change?
I can add some light and shade to this bleak picture because I've stepped into the substantial shoes of the vacant Ed Straw and written a list of data. So I looked back at last year's World Championship, and if you just take an arbitrary Grand Prix, say Russia, 16 of 21, so there's 5 races to go, scroll down the Constructors' Championship. So we already know that the top 3 is not going to make much of a difference, drivers or constructors. But when you're looking at the midfielders, there are circumstances in which getting an extra point here or there could make a difference. So you look at 7th, 8th and 9th after Russia, you had Force India on 35 points, Toro Rosso on 30 points, Sauber on 27 points. Now with 5 races to go, you can understand why they might, at some point during a Grand Prix, order their drivers to get their skates on, because that has a meaningful effect for them at the end of the year. Unfortunately, the spectators don't give a toss, but for the manufacturers, there is a bonus there.
But for that to work, it would have to be open for everyone. So
Yeah.
say in Australia, Kimi's running a distant 14th, but we know the Alpha's got a bit of pace in it. Okay, cool, come in, new tyres, get that point. They can't happen now because he's not going to finish in the top 10. So if you're in that sort of coveted 7th to 10th place, and obviously in Oz there's normally a little bit of unreliability, so it's a good chance to bag some points. You're not going to risk that for another one. You just keep on there managing your tyres, managing your brakes, managing everything in the car as drivers do. If this is some sort of manufactured way, so, but they're driving flat out, well, yeah, for 1 point, that's not really relevant in the rest of the outcome of the race.
That's a very important point, because we're in a formula where engines are limited, so you're only likely to see drivers actually be willing to turn up, or teams particularly. Drivers are always willing to set a fast lap, but teams aren't going to want to say, turn it up to 11 and push in a fast lap unless that engine is right at the end of its life and they think it's going to last. So you'd only see it being done right at the end of a race when kind of it's all settled.
So we've flagged up that there are reasons why the rule includes that you have to finish in the top 10 to be eligible for the point. But in fact, would we have been better off, or would F1 have been better off giving everybody outside of the points something to race for towards the end of a Grand Prix? Would it have been worth the potential disruption or bit of anarchy that we would have seen and the way it would have messed up the results, just so there would be a reason to talk about the teams further down the back as they do go low fuel, soft tyres, turn the engine up? Would that have in fact made it more interesting? Because a lot of the feedback I had from fans when they heard about this rule change was, that's going to be great, it'd be something really different towards the end of a Grand Prix. I then told them it was only for the top 10 and they went, oh, well, that's a waste of time then.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think had it been, it's one of these ones where actually for Formula One, not following the way the other people have done it would probably be the right way to go. Mainly because of the size of the spectacle of Formula One and everyone's watching it. They don't really just want to put a car out for a couple of laps like you would in GP2 or in Formula E, where teams would just deliberately run their energy down to get those 2 points before they went into the top 10. When you've got the eyes of the world on you and you're racing for a manufacturer, you want to at least be seen to finish. But it would have made those last 8 laps or whatever a little bit more exciting, because you might have had Grosjean or Magnussen or one of the Racing Point guys all go for it. You might have 3 or 4 of them, whacking the soft
like
tyres
a
on
mini
it.
qualifying session at the end of a Grand Prix.
But that's not what's going to happen. I wonder whether they might look at a couple of races in and how it's either been a Ferrari, Red Bull or Mercedes driver that's taken these points and look at it again, because I know we've talked about the great random fastest laps in history, and that, I think if you can get that, there becomes a little bit of value in it. Just given like as I said, the guy out of the top 3 teams who's had the worst race, an extra point. I can't see the point in that at all.
Yeah, the back 4 are only going to be interested, as in the back 4 of the top 10, if say you have one of those races where a gap of say 25-30 seconds has grown between those positions, and they actually do have a pit stop in their pocket, and they might have a spare set of sticky tyres that they might feel inclined to use.
Yeah.
But that's going to be something that doesn't necessarily happen very often. And also, why wouldn't you allow the people just outside the cusp of the top 10, as it were, who haven't really got much of an opportunity to go for points, to actually try and get something? That at the moment they're all wasted, and I'm sure the Liberty Media would much rather have something that gives them something exciting to show at the end of a race, when kind of the cameras are just lazily following the leaders round and the commentators are just ticking down the clock until it goes until the checkered flag's done.